What's going on, guys? This is the next episode in my Forza Horizon tuning tips series here. Today we're going to be covering suspension. And full disclosure, I don't think I'm that great at tuning suspensions. I think I'm okay. I mean, I'm decent at it, but it's definitely probably my weak point as far as tuning goes in this game. But I'm going to share with you the things that I kind of tend to follow, the rules I tend to follow, and it's how I like to tune my cars for each discipline of racing for the most part. We're going to start here, just some general tips. It's usually want stiffer suspension for road racing, softer suspension for dirt or cross country racing. Because when you're on, like on road race, you want stiffer suspension because you're on a smoother surface. It's going to allow you to transfer weight easier. It's just going to be a little bit more maneuverable. And on the flip side, for like a dirt or cross country build, you want the softer suspension because it's going to be a lot of uneven terrain, a lot of rugged terrain, a lot of jumps, a lot of bumps. And having a softer suspension, it's going to help kind of keep the wheels in contact with that surface a lot easier. It's going to be more maneuverable for that type of racing. And another good tip I like to follow is have stiffer springs like where the engine is. Like for example, if you have a rear or mid-engine car, you're going to put stiffer springs in the back to support the engine and have softer springs up front. Where if you have like a traditional setup where the engine's in front of the car, you're going to want to have stiffer springs in the front to support the engine, softer springs in the rear where the weight is not. And for me, I think like if you're building an off-road tune, try to have like the max ground clearance as possible. Having a max ground clearance, the highest ride height you possibly can have, is generally going to be the way to go. And for road racing, I like to have the ride height as low as I possibly can without having the car bottom out over any kind of small imperfections in the road. I can kind of just throw the car out of balance and make it kind of lose traction. And for dirt, I usually like to have it like right in the middle, like a little bit more towards the higher side of the ride height slider, just so it can kind of, not be able to handle jumps well and not completely lose it if you go over like a bump or like a some part of like a bad camber turn or something like that. Having a decent amount of ride height and keep the car stable on most of the road surfaces. If you have it like way too high, if you're on like a dirt race that has like some like asphalt sections mixed in, and kind of make the car handle just a little bit weird. So not having it too high, not having it too low, having it right in the middle is usually the way I like to go. Now for camber, I generally like to run a little bit of negative camber on pretty much any build I make, just to kind of help with just how it turns. Like on turns, it kind of helps corner entry a little bit like that, and just any kind of course, if you're doing any kind of turning, like camber is usually going to help the car just kind of handle a little bit better. If you're doing like just straight line drag racing, for example, you don't need camber at all. It's not going to help you at all. It's just going to wear your tires, especially if you're playing with tire wear. It's going to help wear stuff a lot quicker. And also, negative camber does kind of hinder the car's overall ability when it brakes. It can kind of compress everything and make it feel a little weird. So like if you're going fast and try to stop, make a right-hand turn, if you have that wheel cranked to the right while you're braking, it can kind of make it handle a little bit weird with camber. So be mindful of that. And for steering angle, like it says on the game description, like the higher steering angle, the less negative camber you have to run because they kind of complement each other from a handling perspective. I agree with that. So generally, if I have like a 7.0 for road, which is generally what I like to shoot for if I build my own suspensions, you can kind of have less negative camber, like having like a negative 1.5 on the front, like a negative 1 on the rear, or something like that. Usually works pretty well. You can kind of adjust it from there. You can kind of look at your stats on like the braking performance, like the 0 to 60 times, and see which one helps keep those numbers as low as possible. That can be a good way to judge what you think you make your adjustments based off of. That's just a good, I guess, and a good easy tip for somebody out there that's not really used to tuning suspensions. And for dirt cross country racing, usually I like to have like a 6.5, not all the way at 7, and then I can have a little bit more negative camber on top of that, like having a negative 2 on the front, negative 1 on the rear, with a 6.5 steering angle for dirt. It tends to work most of the time for me. It gets a good baseline to work off of. Now for something like a massive vehicle, like really long wheelbase, huge heavy vehicle, I usually like to have a lower steering angle. It seems like if you have the higher steering angle, like the steering's going to be more responsive, but you're not going to have as much like steering area to play with, if that makes any sense. That's the way it feels for me. So I tend to have like a lower steering angle for a build like that. Very few instances going to really have to deal with this. But if you have like a massive heavy off-road vehicle, having a lower steering angle, the steering itself is not going to be as precise, as responsive. You're going to have more I guess steering room to mess with. If that makes any sense, and kind of just make it a little bit more maneuverable for that. Again, that's kind of just the way I feel about the way when I play the game. It's how it feels to me. I could be completely wrong. You can kind of do it your own way and see if you can get maybe a different outcome. And another thing I'm going to touch on here is anti-roll bars. I think generally a good rule of thumb is, especially for road racing, this is definitely going to be something you want to try, and it works for dirt and cross country as well to a certain degree. Have the softest front anti-roll bar you can have and the stiffest rear anti-roll bar you can have. So have that 165 setup and adjust from there. It's generally going to make the car handle a little bit better. It's going to loosen the car up, make it turn better. There are going to be some instances where, say you have like a car maybe like has a lot of like weight reduction done to it. If it has like stock suspension, if you have that 165 setup going on, if you make like a high-speed turn or any kind of like sudden turn, those rear wheels can lift off the ground just a little bit, and it can kind of, especially if you're like a dirt race or something like that, it can kind of make it feel like the car is digging into the dirt. So what you want to do is from there, I like to do in increments of 5, adjust on each end. So instead of a 165, try like a 660, and if it still does it, do another 5, like another 5-point adjustment there on each side until you get it to where it's not doing that. That way you're not getting the wheels lifting off the ground, but you're still having that the good balance and having it be able to maintain oversteer into a corner, for example. It's not going to be an understeering pig, and you're going to be able to have more maneuverability. That's just the way I like to look at it. There are some like dirt racing cars, like the Ford Focus, for example, the '01 Ford Focus WRC on Horizon 5, or like the Brocky Bronco, for example. Like I tend to have soft anti-roll bars on both sides, on both ends, I should say. But I do like to have a little bit stiffer on the rear. So instead of like the 165, I'll have like a 510 or like a 1020, something like that, to where it's too stiff. It's just going to make handling really bad on a vehicle like that, unless you tune the suspension in some wacky way. But again, I'll show an example of all this in work, or a few different examples of how I like to tune my cars. I'm going to backtrack a little bit here and go back up to the spring section here. Like for the rebound stiffness, I like to have it match the spring stiffness, like where the slider is, in conjunction with each other, so they match. And I like to have the bump stiffness half of the rebound stiffness. I don't know if it makes sense per se, but it tends to work for me almost all the time. A lot of times you can do like an even like distribution on like road racing, where we'll have like the bump stiffness, rebound stiffness, both the same value. Have like the rebound on the front and the rear the same, and then the bump would be half of that, and then have it to where the spring stiffness is in the same spot as the rebound on the slider. Again, I'll show that here on the next little section here. It might not make any sense at all, but it's just what tends to work for me. Highlighting again why I don't think I'm very good at tuning suspensions, but some of the stuff does in fact work for me. So it's just going to be kind of what you think works for you. Find what works for you. So now we're on here to my favorite part of the video. If you're not good at tuning suspensions at all, I will say a lot of the preset suspensions work very well, and you can use those extra few points that you're going to have from not going into a full-fledged rally or race spring build. You can use those points into upgrading other parts of the car. Like for dirt racing, a lot of the times having a stock or sports suspension works pretty well. The only time it can be a little bit, I guess, a pain is going to be on like jumps. Like when you land on like a jump, it can kind of have a weird like rebound effect to where it kind of seems a little unorthodox, a little bit uncomfortable. But overall, it's going to perform pretty well if you have a stock or a sports suspension. And for road racing, stock, street, or sport can work really well depending on what kind of car you have. I will say if you have like a super high-powered S1 build that's like no weight reduction capabilities done to it at all, or if you have a really high-powered S2 or X racing car, I would try to go ahead and tune a precise road racing suspension setup, just because it's going to make that car a little bit more stable. But most of the time, honestly, like I've figured out lately that a lot of these preset suspension setups do work pretty well. And like cross country, I try to go stock anytime I can. I kind of learned that from Horizon 5. I just feel like it works overall better, especially on like jumps and that sort of thing. So I've kind of backtracked and used that same mindset when I've reattacked some of my Forza Horizon 4 tunes as well. But like a lot of my favorite cars across the board, I've gone to using some kind of preset suspension, and I get better results out of it. Like for example, the 2005 Ford GT on like Forza Horizon 4. That is my favorite S1 road racing car, probably in the series. I used to use my own formula for a race suspension build. I ended up taking that off and using a stock racing suspension, and it works beautifully for my specific setup on the car. It is like a lightweight grip-based build, but then again, I tried doing the same thing with more of a high-power build, where handling wasn't as much of a priority, and it did not work well for me at all for that particular car. So that's when I kind of backtracked back to the racing suspension. But a lot of times these presets are going to work very well. And like if you're doing like B class dirt racing or A class dirt racing, for example, having a stock or a sports suspension works well most of the time. Like it's not going to be that huge of a difference from that, compared to like a very, very high tune dirt racing suspension or rally suspension. So this is just an easy way to get by if you're not confident in tuning suspensions. Kind of like myself, you can backtrack a little bit into using these presets, and they tend to work pretty well. I'm going to show some examples here now of a road racing build. It's the 2017 Ford GT Welcome Pack from Forza Horizon 4. Alright, so here's what works for me. Like on this specific car, for example, like on the camber, I have found for this car, for the 2017 Ford GT across the board, this tends to work well for me. Having that, and this is full disclosure, this specific one does not have like a preset suspension. You have to tune each individual thing, or at least gives you the ability to. So for this one, having the -5 degrees of camber on the front and having 0 on the rear, it's good balance between handling and just straight line traction and cornering traction. It's just pretty balanced. The steering angle again is at 7, allowing me to run less camber to get results of good handling. We go here on the anti-roll bars. I have that 1:65 setup. Works really well for road racing. I'd say like 95% of the time. Very, very good. Keeps the car nice and loose. Handles well. You get a decent amount of oversteer, but not too much. And it's just a preference, and it's just a bright way to do it most of the time. Now I go to springs here. This is where I kind of go where I have the bump stiffness and the springs, the rebound stiffness and springs on the same slider. As you can see here, for like the rebound stiffness, I have an 8 and a 12 for the front and the rear, then half of that for the stiffness. So like I have 8 on the front, I have 4 for bump stiffness, and the rear I have 12 for rebound, I have 6 for the bump stiffness. So that's kind of the way I like to do it. And for the springs, again, I like to have this in the same slider, or the slider in the same spot. So for springs, roughly a 644.7 and a 924. They're going to be in the same spot on the slider. It tends to just work well for me, especially for road racing. And ride height, 3.3. It's all the way as high as I could possibly go, but it's still a very, very low to the ground car. If I have it a lot lower than that, the car is just a little bit unstable, especially if I'm going like a uphill high speed section, kind of get a little wonky. So that's why I have it all the way maxed out 3.3. And that's a good example for that. Now we go to a dirt racing build. This is the 86 Hoonigan Ford RS200 Evo on Forza Horizon 5. This is what works for me, having that negative camber, having a -2 on the front, -1 on the rear, steering angle at 6.5. Anti-roll bars, again, that 165 works well. And the springs, I have it like all the way as soft as possible, and I have the ride height all the way max, because even if it's like with like if you had like a rally suspension, for example, like this car is just still very low to the ground, and for dirt racing you kind of want that ground clearance, so having it all the way maxed out is probably going to maximize it, at least in my opinion. So I have that the way it is. And for bump stiffness and rebound stiffness, this one is a little bit of an outlier compared to what I usually like to do, but I found for this, having the 4, 5, 2, 2.5 just seems to work well. So you can kind of look at that and form your own conclusions from it. This is just what works for me in this particular car. Again, the engine's in the rear, so I will have a little bit more, there's stiffer springs in the rear, and the bump stiffness, rebound stiffness is going to be a little bit higher value to support that weight as well. Now here we go. This is an example of where I'm going to have even values on the damping settings here. I'll get to that in a second. This is 2001 Ford Focus WRC. Again, the negative camber, a little bit different than the RS200, but they're in line, the same ratio. It's just a little bit different numbers here. Steering angle still at 6.5, and this is one of the anti-roll bars. If I had that 165, it's just a little bit too out of control for me. So I found a 1020 is best, but again, I like to have stiffer on the rear no matter what. than I would on the front. I could have it more soft. I usually always have the values like that at least. I never have it where it's stiffer on the front and softer on the rear. I used to way back in the day when I didn't know what I was doing, but now I know what I'm doing just a little bit more than I did before. So again, I like to have it that way, where at least it's stiffer on the rear than the front. And for the springs here, I have roughly the same spring rate value, the 273.7, 273.6 to keep it nice and even. Ride height, again, 7.7 even. And the stiffness, the rebound and bump stiffness, I have 4, then half of that's 2. Again, it's a 50-50. It's even, everything's even here, and it tends to work pretty well. Overall, I don't know if you guys are going to get much out of this video. I'm trying to explain things as best I can. But again, I'm not super good at tuning suspension, so I've kind of fallen back on these tuning presets that the game provides for you, and they tend to work for you most of the time. But if you do want to build your own suspensions, I'm just kind of laying out the tips and tricks and just theories and rules that I tend to follow. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to cover next in this tuning series, but whatever it may be, hopefully I'll see you guys there. Leave a like on this video, help you out, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.